I'm the kind of person that, once I get something that I want to do, if it doesn't work, I really just keep working at it. A lot of people were like, "You're crazy," and so that helped, because I was like, "I will do this," And I was sitting and I was just looking at the instrument, the Bazantar, and it was one of those cool things where you had got a bunch of information in your subconscious, or you've been thinking about it for a long time. You had a bunch of things, and all of a sudden, and I called it a thought ball because the whole idea came to me pretty much all at once.
Hi, you're listening to Conversations with Musicians with Lahja Roseman. This podcast strives to inspire you through the personal stories of a diversity of musicians with in-depth conversations and great music that reveal the depth and breadth to a life in music. Mark Deutsch is a brilliant and unique musician who has devoted the last 3 decades of his life to his instrument, the Bazantar. There's only one Bazantar, which is a double bass hybrid with elements of the sitar. It has 6 main strings, 4 drone strings, and 29 sympathetic strings. Mark grew up as a multi-instrumentalist, but primarily a bass player, playing classical, jazz, and rock, and gave up a successful career as a performer to devote himself to the Bazantar. While studying sitar with Ustad Imrat Khan, Mark began delving into the universal fundamentals of music and its underlying frequency structures. The nonlinear mathematical patterns that exist in sound are found universally in the natural world, including seashells, and Mark goes into some of the math of the overtone series in some detail, as well as fascinating specifics of how the Bazantar and his playing of it have evolved. You'll hear Mark talk about how he developed his patented engineering solution to construct a separate housing for the sympathetic strings. In this episode, Mark demonstrated live and also is sharing not only excerpts from previously released recordings, but a preview from an upcoming album. Like all my episodes, you can watch this on my YouTube channel or listen to the podcast on all the podcast platforms, and I've also linked the transcript to my website, lahjaroseman.com. The podcast theme music was from composer Nick Cold, and you can use the timestamps to navigate the episode. Before we jump into our conversation, I wanted to remind you that you can support this independent podcast through both my Ko-fi page and also my collection of merchandise, which features a very cool, unique, and expressive design from artist Steffi Kelly. This weekly podcast is in season 4, and I send out an email newsletter where you can get access to exclusive information about upcoming guests. Have a look at the description of this episode where you'll find all the links. Now to Mark Deutsch and his Bazantar. Hey Mark, thanks so much for joining me here today. This episode today is really going to focus on your beautiful instrument, the Bazantar, and I know because we already recorded the big part of the episode, just full disclosure here. So we're going back because I just really wanted you to speak to the audience about what led you to completely change your life and devote yourself to this instrument.
Cool, it sounds great. Well, I was, I started out as a musician playing gigs when I was 12 years old with my father and my uncle, and that was really interesting because we played the entire history of the 20th century pop music, Western pop music, and that was a weird education. I wasn't one of those kind of kids that had private lessons and was a classical musician, and my parents really supported. It was more like I was a working kid. So I did that, and then I rebelled, and I went and studied classical music when I was 18. I was a jazz musician, and I went to the conservatory. I got in the conservatory. I studied classical music, but I didn't study classical music with the intention of becoming a classical bassist. I studied classical music because I wanted to learn the acoustic bass. I was a really good electric bass player. And I wanted to be a jazz bassist, but I thought studying classical music would help me with my technique, and I wanted to learn to read notes because I was excellent, really proficient at reading chord changes, and improvising. So then I did that, and that I did on and off for 10 years before I graduated. And I sort of made my living as a jazz musician. And I also like played in the symphony part-time, played in the Illinois Symphony, and played all kinds of music. But there was this night where I was at a party, at the conservatory party, and everybody was, you know, whatever, and I was feeling like antisocial and weird and uptight, which is not that uncommon for me. And I went into this room. It was like a sunroom. It was like a little bit off, and I just wanted to like take a break from people or something. And I was sitting in this chair, or this lounge chair, and there was some music on, and it happened to be my teacher, Ustad Imrat Khan, playing sitar, which I thought was a sitar because I didn't know anything. And a sitar is like the bass version of a sitar. This was like my first exposure to this kind of music, and I've always been like really interested in like, you know, different kinds of music, unusual things. You know, when I was a kid, I heard Stravinsky when I was like 14 maybe, and just got really into like the weirdest classical music, like Ussachevsky and Cowell and Charles Ives, you know, anything that was really unusual. But then this music, this Servahar music was, I think it was like a pentatonic scale. It was like super simple. There weren't that many notes in the scale, which was very different from what I was doing. I was playing like, you know, avant-garde bebop and avant-garde classical music, and really intellectually, you know, heavy music with chromatic, you know, atonal and chromatic and, you know, modulations and all this stuff. And this was the antithesis of that. This was extremely slow and majestic and profound and peaceful, and my nervous system sort of like just super relaxed. It was kind of like exactly what I wanted, though I didn't know that's what I wanted. You know, I was a little bit like uptight and socially like weirded out or whatever, and this was just like this sonic, wonderful massage. But I didn't actually hear it at first. I just experienced it. And then I noticed, I'm like, wow, what is this music? It's so odd and wonderful. You know? And that kind of scared me too, because I was like, I can't do this. Like, I could never see myself playing this slowly. Because I was like, you know, like, you know, playing bass and all that stuff. And this was like, then the note would just empty space, and then, you know, it's like, and I couldn't see myself doing it, and that sort of like terrified me. I'm like, I don't have what it takes to do this, you know. So I was very impressed by that. You know? So I went out and I bought a sitar at this store called Coyote Spa in St. Louis, where I lived. And it was funny because the guy, he thought I looked like I didn't look like a classical musician. I looked like a rock musician with long hair and looked like a hippie. And he was very, very condescending when I went to buy the sitar. And I had money with me, and I was like, you know, well, just sit down, show me how to sit with it, and show me how to play with it. You know, show me how to hold it and whatever, and I could, you know, play it, because I could play most any string instrument with no problem. So I could play it, and I remember him being kind of shocked. And so then I bought a sitar, and I got this little weird book by Ravi Shankar, which, I don't know, it was kind of pointless, but I got it, and I bought it with the sitar, and I taught myself how to play the sitar, and I taught myself how to tune it, which was more of a thing, not tuning, but stringing. Stringing a sitar is challenging, and that was the biggest challenge. And when I did meet my teacher, he constantly wouldn't accept that I taught myself how to string it. He's like, no, somebody taught you how to do this. I'm like, no, I taught myself. He's like that. Anyhow, so I played sitar on my own just by listening to records for, I don't know, quite a few years, 5 or 6 years. I actually had little gigs and stuff. I had all kinds of gigs. I had blues gigs and rock gigs and jazz gigs, I had a classical gig. I was like, whatever you wanted, I was making my money doing all kinds of different stuff. Which, it's kind of how I grew up as a musician, playing with my dad and uncle. Just like whatever you need, very much a working musician vibe. But I was really personally into the esoteric aspects of music, the deeper, profound, what does music do to consciousness, kind of thing.
You're about to hear an excerpt from Lahja from the Picasso Tunings. Please check out the link to Mark Deutsch's recordings in the show notes of this episode.
Very unusually, the guy who I was listening to, Ustad Imrat Khan, this great Serbahar player he's the younger brother of Alain Khan. He's one of the three trinity of sitar players in the 20th century, Nikolai Banerjee, Ravi Shankar, and Alain Khan. So he's his younger brother. And he came to St. Louis to Washington University, which is school is right where I lived. And I had been making all my friends listen to this music. They're like, come on, man. And I was like, come on, listen to this great music. I was really into him, and I was really into Sultan Khan, who was a saranga. I was leading the saranga. Anyhow, when he came, they're all like, you're a witch, man. You brought this guy to town because you boys made us listen to him, and here he is, and now you're going to study with him. So I started studying with him, and studying the sitar. And early on, he always was like, oh, it'll take you 20 years to learn how to play the shruti's, which is the fine tuning, mathematically ratio-based exact tuning of, like the difference between a D sharp and an E flat. They're 22 cents apart. It's this ratio 81/80. But he didn't know any of that stuff. He just knew that, like a piano would be like tempered and it's based on the 12/42, and it's like technically out of tune. And so he knew that. But he was saying, for me, it would take me a really long time to be able to hit those because I was a Western cat and I didn't grow up in that system. And that pissed me off kind of. I was like, I don't want it to take 20 years. And I was reading this book at the time. This is a weird copy of it, but this guy, I don't know how you pronounce his name. It's Alain Danielou or whatever. This guy's amazing author. He's written a bunch of books, and not all of them are on music. And he breaks down all these different tuning systems. Oh, it's music and the power of sound. And this is kind of a cheesy copy. I have given this book to maybe 30 people in my life. I bought it from my students. I've given it to people. It's the one thing that I give to people that want to know what I'm doing. I'm decoding this book right now, which is a cooler thing. This is North Indian classical music by the same guy. And what I did, which is the most interesting thing I did, it's not that big of a deal, but it's the most interesting thing, is I have translated all of the information in these books about tuning into sense. So when you think of like what a fifth is, 700 cents, 7 half steps, or like what an octave is, it's 1,200 cents. And what I did is I translated that into the Shruti, and you can see how it's different. Like the difference between a real fifth, a perfect fifth, that's really 3 vibrations to 2, or a 3/2 fifth. That's 702 cents. I mean, 701.97, but 702 is very close. And so I made this chart, which I don't have in front of me right now. And anyhow, I made this chart at that time when my teacher was like, it's going to take you forever to learn this. And I made this chart, and I had this programmable tuner, which I still use from the 80s. It's a Korg MT 1200. And there are way better tuners, I'm sure, now. But this is the one that I use, and it's like 40 years old, and I use it, and I just have it tattooed into my mind how this thing works. And so I made this big chart. I've posted this chart online a bunch, and people are always like really into it, because it breaks down like these 66 harmonically resonant vibrations and how they work, and I teach this, and I'm really into it. And I'd gotten really, really deeply into this. At the same time I was studying with my teacher, I was getting super into the math. He didn't teach me the math. The math, I'd never been into math. I mean, I was always good at math, but I never studied it. And I kind of like had this latent ability in math. And also this sort of ability in engineering I didn't know I had. When I made the Bazantar, I was just really, really good. I had, with my father, my father was an artist and a musician, but he also was like incredibly good at like making things. Like he had me make a gazebo when I was like 13 years old, and just came home and like was like, okay, these are the directions, this is you do it. He was just super perfectionist. And I had to make a gazebo, but I made all kinds of stuff. Grumpily and kind of hating it, as a kid, but all that draftsmanship, technical thing, working with tools, all that stuff, I totally stayed away from my whole life. Like, I know how to work on cars, but you would never know that I know how to work on cars because I don't like it. But when I started with the Bazantar, all of this wealth of latent information came into use, and I was able to build the Bazantar. And super fortunate to have some friends who had a music shop with all kinds of tools and stuff. And I taught there, they liked me and whatever. They let me come in and just work at a deck with all these tools and grinders and everything.
One thing you didn't address is why so many sympathetic strings?
Because more is better.
Okay.
No. Well, that, the prototype, I showed you the prototype last time,
yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, the prototype had less strings, and I really wanted low strings, I really wanted strings that were like a combination of a tambura and whatever sympathetics. The sitar, my imagination was not like I want an Indian instrument. My imagination was like, I love classical music. I'm a jazz musician, and I like jazz, I like improvising, but jazz is always doing this stuff where you're going in 16-bar cycles or 32-bar cycles or whatever, and I feel like I'm like one of those rats on a cycle going round and round. I love jazz, but I don't like that aspect of jazz. And Indian music's great. I love Indian music also, but it's very parlorish. It's very, it's not panoramic. in the sense where classical music has these epic vistas. You know, you listen to like Schmetna or like, I don't know, Bartok or Mahler or whatever. And I mean, I know that's kind of a ridiculous thing to say. I want this instrument to have this sort of vast thing, but the Bazantar does, for a solo instrument, have a really vast sort of territory, and the amount of sympathetic strings, because they get in multiple octaves, like 4 or 5 octaves, you don't get the kind of sympathetic thing that you get going on with like a sitar, where it's like bum meow, bum meow. You get this multiple level of oscillations between octaves, where it's like bum meow, and it's like much vaster. And it's like acoustical illusion that it makes. And I didn't think that it was I didn't really know how well it was going to work. The prototype didn't work. The prototype proved that it would work, but it didn't work like in some big epic way, and it wouldn't stay in tune. So I really overbuilt the one that I have now. I made it so it does not go out of tune. I mean, unless the whole instrument changes. I mean, if I just sit here with this humidity and this temperature, the instrument stays in tune. I haven't tuned it since the last time we talked. You know, so I really overbuilt it, but it turned out better than my best hopes, you know, which was amazing to me. You know, so it did that sort of classical panoramic thing that I was looking for.
Here's an excerpt from Avodah from the album Fool. So Mark, I found out about you and your Bazantar probably the same way some of my podcast listeners did. It was when I interviewed Anja Roseman and Cara Talve about Prehistoric Planet.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so we talked about the Bazantar and your work, and there was a little clip featured. So that was very cool, and it's been on my mind since then.
That was a really, really cool project. It was interestingly challenging because the Bazantar is it's kind of set up like a sitar or an oud or something. You know, it's in a key. You know, it's got a drum, and I went down to LA and I explained it all to them and I showed them. Like, you know, if you want it to sound like the Bazantar, at the time it was in the key of G, and they were like, okay, cool. And then they sent me stuff in like every other key. And I was like, okay, this is like had reconfigured my mind. But it was like a lot of projects. It was like I thought, oh, this is impossible. I can't do this. But this is like the instrument's not tuned like that. It doesn't work like that. So I had to figure out how to play the Bazantar in a bunch of different keys, but what it doesn't do. I mean, it was cool.
Okay.
Yeah. Super challenging, but it turned out great. They liked it.
Interesting.
Had fun.
And actually, for people who don't have that kind of budget, you have sampled it, right? Like people can buy a sample pack.
There, yeah, there's a thing on ADO I did a long time ago, 15 years maybe now, and they wanted me to do another one, and I might, and that would be cool. It's used a lot. I hear that it's used like the Bazantar box is what I call it. Is it's on all kinds of recordings. My partner, she's a dancer, Martha. She was listening to something, and she freaked out. She was like, "They stole your Bazantar. You didn't work on this project." She was all, and it's like, it's the virtual Bazantar.
Yeah.
So, I actually don't have much idea what it sounds like. I've not really heard. I have a Bazantar, so I don't really use.
Yeah.
I don't. So, but I've heard great things about it, and people really like it. I have an idea of making a sound library that's more extensive than that, and more of some of my unusual techniques, instead of just more in depth, and shows off some different aspects of the Bazantar.
Okay, well, in a few minutes you're going to be playing a bit. Maybe you could show some of those techniques. That would be really interesting.
Yeah. I have tuned the Bazantar differently in the last couple months. I was tuned like kind of like a sitar. So it's tuned like a sitar, like an open fifth with a fourth on top. Is one of the ways I played it and tuned it. It's 6 strings, So it was a GD, GC,
Oh, okay.
which does a lot of really cool things with harmonics and accompanying yourself, particularly with bowing. You get this rolling bow thing happening. You get this big, stuff with a melody on top. It's nice. But I'm always changing, developing the techniques, different techniques, and so I was messing around and I came to my friend that I play with, this guy Jaron Lanier. He's got one of the largest collections of played instruments in the world, and he's this very famous scientist, but he's got just amazing instruments. And I was like, oh, I really love the oud, and he says, well, here's an oud, So so he gave me an oud, and I started like wasting too much of my time playing the oud and not playing the Bazantar, so I stopped. But I got in my mind the tuning, and the tuning, it's so bizarre. I came back, the tuning is a fifth and then 4 soloists. So it's like, now it's A, then A, E, A, and then it's A, and then it's just tuned like a bass. E, A, D, G, C, because I have a high C. And so that's really new. And that's opened up a whole different thing. And I've mostly just, for like, it's been like 6 months now, I've almost just been plucking the instrument. But I'm trying to work on these plucking techniques where I use my thumb, and I have a completely different approach to plucking than a bass player would. And I've been expanding my left hand. My Bazantar is really large. It's the last instrument you would ever want to play solo, and that's pretty much all I do. And to run the kind of lines that I'm hearing in my head, I used to play the Bazantar with kind of a sitar technique where it's like 2 fingers, and you use one finger kind of as a stylus, and the other finger drops, and it sounds like really difficult, but it's amazing if you practice it. And I used to play sitar, and so I developed that technique on the Bazantar, which is what my first recording was like, my full recording. And so I'm using that technique, and then the Picasso Tunings is something completely bizarre, where I retune the instrument for every piece, so that the harmonics make these really super in tune rags. And so it's easy to play the harmonics, sort of easy to play the harmonics, but then I had to relearn how to play the instrument tuned in these really bizarre ways, like for every piece. And that was pretty insane, but it turned out Like he really made the Bazantar like an orchestra. You know, Picasso Tunings like that. But now I'm working with this oud tuning, and I'm much more trying to work out like sort of a lyric solo sort of oud approach and stuff. And to do that, it's like instead of playing like what a bass player plays, like it's like this is a half step. You're a violinist, right?
I am.
Yeah. So it's like these are half steps of my instrument, and it's really hard to run a scale when this is like, you know, C sharp, and D right there. So what I've done is this, and you know these are whole steps now, and so I can run across and
So for those
run scale.
people who can't see, you're using your thumb like a cellist wooden thumb position, kind of?
Yeah, except I'm using it everywhere.
Yeah. Okay.
And because I never did use my thumb much before because it didn't sound good. You know, it sounded like a capo. It didn't have, you know, vibrato was not very good. It was just like, oh, you know, the last resort, I'm going to use my thumb. So I never used it because I just couldn't get the kind of sound I wanted out of it. And then during the pandemic, I kept playing these like arpeggiations and scales, and my thumb was in the right position, but I wasn't using it. And I would say, oh, well, just put your thumb there. Oh, but that doesn't sound good. And so for almost a year, I just played with my thumb.
Mark, I'm trying to understand physically. I mean, don't you need a little counter pressure from your thumb in the back of the neck?
Would think, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, you know, all in here. It's weird though, it works on a different muscle than when I'm, you know, holding an instrument like this, because I'm holding it like this. And it's bizarre in a way because it sort of gives my muscles some relief from where they have always been working. So it's like a different set of muscles. At first, like with everything else, I all kinds of cramps and stuff, you know, all kinds of physical issues, which I wasn't sure. You know, it's like, is this going to work or not? It might not work. You know, it's a big risk. Kind of like the thing I did with the tuning my instrument. It was a big risk and it was a big challenge, but it paid off. And this is paying off. I mean, it takes a lot of strength, and it takes just like setting your body and then just, you know, imagining, you know, the energy going into it. It's almost like, I don't know, people that do Reiki or something. Or just getting your nervous system to accept that position and then relax and then build the strength, you know. Also, I couldn't do this if my bass was set up like a classical bass. It's just, I mean, I could, but I wouldn't be lyric, you know, I wouldn't be fluid. My bass is set up to do this. It's not set up like a jazz bass. It's not set up like a classical bass. Those are two different setups. It's set up so that you can both bow and pluck reasonably, you know, well sound good, but also that doing something like this with all the slides and stuff I do, it actually has to be pretty low, and I carve my own bridges, and I do all I built the Bazantar. I'll show you that in a second, but this is an interesting technique with the sympathetics, like plucking. These are not these are called the drum strings. They're called chikari strings in Indian music. An interesting technique I've developed is I'm using this as like a capo, and I'm putting it on the harmonics, and so I get like that's what they sound like, and then. So I just practiced that kind of stuff for a long time. I started out, though, with my thumb like this. My fingernails too. I haven't done this for a while, but and this has a really cool sound too, because it's really clear. And with there, I'm right on the fingernail. Yeah, and I haven't been doing that as much. It's a good technique, but now I'm doing this more, and then I can drop in. And see, it gives me that. Okay, so that's the tonic of this thing. And this is a whole step there, a whole step down. And if I was playing like this, which I still do, of course, then it's the proper bass technique would be the half step. So if you want to go, you're going, which is fine, sounds good, whatever. But if you want to go, that spread, even up here. And it's got a good sound. Now I can vibrate. Yes, excuse me.
How much lower than a standard double bass is your lowest string?
Right now it's a low A. So it's a low A below the low B on a 5-string bass. So it's a low A, like this is the E. This is the A.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Hi, just a quick break from the episode. If you're interested in unique and unusual instruments, check out my episodes with instrument maker Lindsay Pollock and with Buchu Ganbriged, who's a master of both Mongolian overtone singing and the Morin Kur. I've also featured a lot of instruments with sympathetic strings. Some of them are with Cretan lira player Kelly Toma, Bulgarian gadulka player Christina Beleva, and my very first episode with nickel harpa player Kirsty Money. I've also featured improvisers from many different traditions, including sitar player Mohammed Asani, and I interviewed the improviser and author Stephen Nachmanovich, who wrote Free Play and the Art of Is. It's a joy to be able to bring these meaningful conversations to you, but this project costs me quite a bit of money and lots of time. Please support this series through either my merchandise store or on my Ko-fi page. You'll find the links in the show notes. For the merch, it features a unique design by artist Steffi Kelly, and you can browse clothes, phone cases, notebooks, water bottles, and more. You'll also find the links to sign up for my newsletter, where you'll get access to exclusive information about upcoming guests. Please check out my back catalog with weekly episodes going back to 2021. Now back to Mark Deutsch and his Bazantar.
Go ahead.
I've interviewed lots of people who play instruments with sympathetic strings. So for those people who aren't familiar with the whole idea, I mean, the idea is you're not touching them, they're just ringing, creating that.
The sympathetic strings are tuned in an interesting way right now. They're not actually tuned to a scale traditionally. They're tuned to just a whole series of fifths. Basically, a suspended ninth chord, and then flat nine, a tritone, and a major third. So it sounds like this. This is the low one. And there's 3 rows of sympathetics. I don't know if they can see it. But there's this low row here. And there's a middle row. And that's one. It's not all of them, it's just the one I can reach. And they all have different personalities. Like that one I just hit has got a weird personality. It's like, listen to this. When it rings, you can hear it. It's like, I have to try to mitigate it because it's where the wolf tone of the instrument is. So it jumps out. And then, let's see. And these are the top layers. And the reason I have it tuned like this is because I'm doing a performance and I'm not playing in just one scale. You know, I'm going to play with a bunch of scales. It's with another person, and you know, she's not going to stay in whatever. Like in Indian music, she's not going to stay in the key. So I want to have sympathetics all over the place. Okay. It's not tuned chromatically, but it's tuned basically to accentuate the fourth, the fifth, the tritone, and then the sevenths and the seconds. But I'm leaving off the thirds and the sixes for 2 reasons. The thirds and the sixes are the ones that I have more tendency to shift. And if your listeners know what shrudis are, there's there's 2 versions of like each major third. There's a bright version and a dark version. And so I'm way more likely to move my thirds and my sixes around. So I don't want to put a sympathetic on those. And also the thirds and sixes are, you know, already pretty warm and lush, you know, but they're more complicated intervals. So I'm just strategically going with 7 seconds, 4th, and 5th.
That actually makes sense, yeah. You're about to hear an excerpt from The Crooked Road from the Picasso Tunings. So your 1993 prototype, how different was it than this?
The 1993 prototype was completely different. I didn't know what I was doing, and it was intuitive. It's like I'm going to put strings on. I play the sitar, and I'm going to put strings on the Bazantar, on a bass. And so it was kind of like how those are done. It was the strings were strung onto the instrument, because where else are you going to string? I had 3 prototypes that didn't work. 2 of them I actually made, and the one I halfway through I had the epiphany of the Bazantar with the rigid housing, and it's a thing I ended up getting a patent for. But that was a really, really unusual idea, which was why I was able to get a patent for it. The first prototype, sort of a trapezoidal setup with strings going through the bridge, the Bazantar bridge. I could get the strings to vibrate. I couldn't get them to make have any volume. I also had a really hard time keeping in tune, and it was really expensive to hire people who did not think it was going to work. I mean, I could tell they were like, oh yeah, all right, yeah, and it hired me a lot, cost me a lot of money, which I really didn't have, and so I ended up spending a lot of time messing around with it myself. And in that messing around, I figured out what the problems were. And I didn't know how to fix them. I was trying to fix them. But basically, if you want a sympathetic string to vibrate, you have to have the ends of the strings, where the nut and the bridge would be, you have to have those strings, completely stop vibrating anywhere except where that string is going. You really need to tie off the ends a lot. And that wasn't happening. There was like the trapezoidal setup or whatever. I couldn't string the strings tight enough. And when I did, there was so much leakage of energy from the ends. There was too much wobble. And I did all these crazy things like with fishing weights. I remember I put this on the strings. It's a really crazy kind of thing. I've seen a bunch of guys in Europe, though, who are putting sympathetic strings on basses, and they're right where I was, like in 1994. And it's like they're stringing them on the instrument, which, what else are you going to do? And I can't hear them when I'm hearing the recordings. It's like they're like, oh, it brings up all this resonance stuff. I'm like, I don't hear it. I mean, I don't hear the sympathetic strings. It might be a little bit of resonance, which reminds me of how it was with my prototypes. And what happened is I was pretty exhausted, and I'm exhausted with the whole process of trying to get this to work. I'm the kind of person that, once I get something that I want to do, if it doesn't work, I really just keep working at it. And a lot of people were like, "You're crazy," and so that helped, because I was like, "I will do this," I was like, and I was sitting and I was just looking at the instrument, the Bazantar, and it was one of those cool things where you had got a bunch of information in your subconscious, or you've been thinking about it for a long time, you had a bunch of things, and all of a sudden, and I called it a thought ball, because the whole idea came to me pretty much all at once. I was like, oh, I need a rigid housing.
Many people will watch the video, but a lot of people will be listening to the podcast, and they'll be needing to imagine it. Maybe they'll see a photo later or not.
Right.
So as much as you can describe things, it's great.
Okay. So this rigid housing is an external thing that you load onto the instrument. And the logic of it is is that it will cut off the vibrations at either end of the string. So the vibration of the string has nowhere to escape except into the body of the instrument. You know, it also allowed for me to crank the tension up on the strings, like get a lot of tension, and then you get a lot of energy with a lot of tension, and then because the rigid housing holds all that tension, none of that tension is displaced onto the instrument. So the instrument doesn't like, if I put all these strings with all this tension on the instrument wouldn't plug. You know, it would just. That being said, I popped 2 bass bars on my instrument in all this experimentation. You know, one of them was early on, and super humid weather, and the original bass bar on this instrument was pretty pithy. You know, it's pretty small, so I had it replaced, and that was cool. And then the other one was by an accident. The instrument got hit and had to be rebuilt. But yeah, this is the rigid housing, and it does a lot of great things. I mean, it holds the first prototype that worked, the real prototype, I said, which would probably be 1995 when I got the real prototype working. That was made of wood, and I have it. I'll go get it. I'll show it to you. It was made of wood, and it had friction pegs, and it proved the point. It proved that you could get the you could get the sound to be loud enough, and loud enough so that it was comparable to like a sitar or a sarod, that level of sympathetics. But it was impossible to keep in tune, and I learned a whole lot with that. And then I made this, and this I sort of overbuilt. This is like, it's made out of carbon graphite, and I made it a carbon graphite when carbon graphite was not common. It was super expensive, but it's super light, and it. When we finally got the housing together, we put it between 2 cinder blocks. I had these really, really cool guys that helped me, man. I was so lucky. I could have never done it without having these 3 maniac rock guitar engineer dudes. They were like, hey, man, you can come in. And they basically gave me a deck in their shop for years. And they, it was amazing. And they never charged me anything. And then it was just a gift. But we put this thing on cinder blocks, and I just jumped on it. I'm like 250 pounds. Yeah. Just because I wanted to make sure that it was so thin, and it's so thin and so light. I was like, is this thing really going to hold all this, or is it going to snap? And it does a great job. It's totally works. And it allows for the instrument to be really playable. It's huge, but it's like not tight, Even with the weird weather right now, it's pretty good. I'll go get the prototype, the first prototype. This is wood, this is maple. These are harp tuners. And this is way simpler than that thing. But it shows you how, like, if you can see in there, it's like 3 layers of strings packed in. That was a big logistical thing. I drew out, I have the designs, I don't know whether they are, but I drew all this whole thing out and was very meticulous with, putting 29 strings in an area that's about the size of your fist. And they all have to, like, perfectly run without, hitting anything and clanking.
And the housing, Mark, how does it attach to the bass then?
It attaches underneath the fingerboard. And luckily, just fortunately, my bass has, like, a lot of space between the fingerboard and the body. Mm-hmm. It's like where the neck comes in, locks into there, and then goes between the feet of the bridge, and then it attaches to the saddle.
Okay.
Like, it's just underneath the saddle. You know, a lot of things were fortunate in that my bass, you know, and I didn't really know this at the time, but my bass has an really large gap between the fingerboard and the body. So there's enough space to put something there. And a lot of basses don't. You know, a lot of basses, the neck is real close, or the fingerboard is real close to the body. The Bazantar would have never fit in there the way that I built it. I probably would have ended up with a different design if that happened like that.
Okay.
And my saddle had been raised up anyhow to relax some of the tension on the instrument and open it up a little bit. So it all had already been, those factors were already there. And people have wanted me to build more Bazantars, which I'm cool with, and I'd like to make more Bazantars, but right now I really want to, with the time I have left before my body falls apart, I just want to figure out how to play it.
Yeah.
But then I'll probably build Bazantars for people. Or better yet, I'll have somebody who wants me to design them, and then I can just design them, because, like I said, I'm very, 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 very slow, very meticulous. I have a whole box of bridges that I've carved.
Wow, beautiful.
This is my favorite bridge. This is interesting because the sympathetics are split. There's the strings, and then I keep calling them sympathetics, but the drum strings. But the low string goes here. It splits the two drone strings. There's two here and two here. Two of them I had a sympathetic bridge on, so they make that buzzy sound. The other two I didn't, so I could bow them.
Mm-hmm.
I bow these drum strings. It sounds like a sonata. I'll do that for you too. But this is my.
Yeah.
That's my favorite. This is my most extreme. This wing broke off with the sympathetics here. This is my Salvador Dali bridge. This worked great. Sounded fantastic. And this was the first bridge. And this is the bridge that I had before, just now. And it's got this weird thing coming out on that. And that was an experiment. I like to experiment. And that was an experiment of the length of the lowest string, the perfect place to bow the lowest string. And I have an extended 52-inch long low string. And then the perfect place to bow these drone strings is in different places. And if I push this forward on the Chikari strings, I would get a closer, perfect bowing place between this really low string and these really high strings. I didn't find out that it super mattered in the end. This is just what it looks like as I'm working on it.
Okay.
This is my next bridge.
But why are you building a new bridge if the one works well?
Great question. This new bridge is going to be the same as the bridge I just carved, which looks way more normal than any of these, except I'm going to inlay these pickups I have in it.
Okay.
And these pickups are great for recording the instrument plucked.
Here's an improvised piece Mark played for us during the recording of this episode. After we'd been talking for almost 2 hours, I asked him if he wanted to play something else, and this is that improvisation. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.
So in 2019, before the pandemic, I believe you did a bit of a cross-country tour with your Bazantar. So if you want to speak maybe to some of those, the kinds of performances you did and the kinds of audiences and what that experience was like, maybe some highlights.
I did a thing at Brown University in Providence, which was the most interesting to me because that was the one where they really wanted to know about the math, the tunings. The lecture was, music and sound's effect on physiology and consciousness. So I got to talk about the things I really am interested in, which is how vibrations, specific vibrations, affect your nervous system and your consciousness. And there's a whole, like in Indian music, there's a whole really deep, profound sort of study of that. And there's all kinds of very poetic and very I don't know, mystical, or they make a lot of claims of the effects of different kinds of tunings on your nervous system and whatnot. And so that was great. And I got to play the Bazantar, and I had a really quirky, really interesting, really intelligent group of people to talk to. It was really a lot of fun. I did a gig in St. Louis at the place called the Sheldon, which is where I debuted the Bazantar. And so that was cool. People got to see it after 20 years. It was about the 20-year anniversary. And people who had seen me build it, it was great to hear their comments about like what I was like when I was building it. And they were like, oh yeah, we remember you were really crazy, man. You were like so focused and so intense, and you looked like you were on a mission from God, you know. And so that was nice. It was nice to see those people again. And I did a lot of just university things where I would I did a lot of different things. Some things, sometimes I just talk about like improvisation, you know, different approaches to improvising, developing melodies and textures and tones, and developing your ideas, and also like where all my ideas come from and the intersection of different cultures, like Persian music, Indian music, avant-garde 20th century music. I really like Berg right now. But I love atonal music, which is interesting because I play off of the drone. But the kind of music that I like to listen to is I like kind of drone music, you know, like Indian music or Persian music. And then I like sort of the opposite spectrum, but it affects me in a similar way, is like I love like string quartet. I like atonal music that's done with instruments that are not fixed in pitch. Like I love listening to string quartets. Like a really great string quartet where they're all like adjusting the pitches subconsciously or consciously, I'm not sure, and they're just beautiful. And if it's a really great string quartet, like listening to the Bartok, you know, string quartets, I love it. There was a lot of different kind of performances. I had a residency in New York at a recording studio where I did a bunch of gigs and did a bunch of lectures, and I did some kind of, you know, sort of like, I don't know, they said they were sound healing kind of things where people would just come in and lay down and I would just play, you know. And I just had a gig today that's like that, where I'm playing with the singer, and a bunch of people will come in, and there's a light show. It's in San Francisco, and it's at Grace Cathedral, which is a big cathedral, and everything lights. And so I'll play the Bazantar. I'll be this sort of immersive, meditative thing.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about your improvisation. So I know you came, you know, from a jazz background on classical and all that. It must have evolved over the years, but you definitely have a language, you know, having listened to your recordings. There's a Mark Deutsch language. How much of it are you audiating before you play? You know what I mean? How much are you hearing right before you play?
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. My thing now, which is not when like up until I was about my mid-30s, you know, I was a classical bassist, a jazz bassist, and I played sitar, you know, and I was kind of like musician for hire, whatever you wanted, you know, blues or funk or whatever. I play electric bass, and I play all the string instruments, banjo, guitar, whatever. This is a weird story, but I'll go ahead and tell it. I was at a accelerated learning seminar, you know, where you use like hypnosis and concentrate, focus your mind, and learn all these techniques and whatever. And one of these things where we went in groups, or no, we were in groups. We paired off into two people, and you were supposed to model that person's physiology. You're supposed to just model the way they breathe, model the way their eye movements were, whatever. And it was, it was pretty interesting to do that and see what you got just from putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. It was just part of the technique. But then as that thing developed, they had you do it from a distance. So like you would watch a person, but the person didn't know you were watching. You'd pick your person. And there was a Mexican lady that didn't speak very much English. And she was modeling me. And to her, I was this big, scary guy. And that's why she wanted to model me. She was like, I wanted to, model some big, scary man and see what that was like. And when she didn't speak very good English, so when they asked her, they said, well, what did you see? And she was like kind of in shock, or I don't know. She was just like, man, it wasn't what I expected. She said, I heard this really beautiful, but super sad music. It was like the most beautiful but sad music, and it was like, that's what I heard in my head. And I was like, and I was like, I know what you're talking about. I mean, I know what you're talking about. And this was before I started playing sitar in public. But I always played my bass. I practiced my licks, I practiced my jazz stuff, and I practiced my classical whatever. But a lot of times I just played. Just played what I felt. I never thought that anybody would want to hear that. Bass players don't play melodies, blah blah blah. But I would just, play with the bow and do that. But after this lady said that, I'm like, I want to just play what's in my head. And so I almost kind of neurotically, I got into this thing of practicing where I only played that was in my head, and I found out that I typically sing really slow. I don't sing really fast things in my head that much, and I usually don't modulate. And I was like, well, if you don't modulate, you're kind of dumb. It's like, you gotta modulate. I'm playing jazz, everybody it's like, all those like neurotic sort of things. And I was like, just stop that. Just play what you're hearing. Whatever it is, just play it. It's like, oh man, that's really slow. Nobody will know how great I am. I'm not playing fast, Oh, I'm not playing anything, intellectually. Bam. So I got on this thing of like really trying to play what I was hearing. And that developed into a whole bunch of things. And more on the sitar at first. I used to play a lot of sitar. I don't play the sitar anymore because a lot of people play sitar, and I figure I should focus on the Bazantar, even though I love to play it. So there's a lot of things that I don't do because I get so into things. Like I don't play chess because I find it so fascinating that it just takes up so much of my time. And I don't play video games because I know if I did, you'd never see me. That would be the end of my. I have maybe an addictive personality or a compulsive personality, whatever. But I try to like put those energies into something that is unique and interesting, and that's the Bazantar. And I love playing the Bazantar, so it's not really a problem.
Yeah.
But I try to stay away from some other things.
Yeah, I know that you've done a lot of teaching over the years. I'm not sure if you're still teaching.
Yeah, I'm still teaching.
So
Lecturing.
yeah, and do you teach online or only in person?
I teach online. I have Zoom lessons.
Okay, so
I'm
imagining you help different types of musicians, not just bass players.
Yeah. I have a violin student right now, and it was interesting how she came to me, but I'm mostly just working on her intonation and tone, and I'm teaching her where the harmonics are. And she's like a Baroque violinist, but that's not what she's playing with me. I'm teaching her how to play like what's in her head.
Yeah.
And how do you manifest that? That's fun. during the pandemic, I taught one of my students, who's a bass player, I taught his 5 and 6-year-old daughters. Oh man, that was fun. It was really fun, but really intense.
What were they playing?
Guitars.
Okay.
But a lot of times we did rhythms, you know. We would play rhythms, we'd sing, you know, they'd sing.
Okay.
And I'd teach them guitar. You know. Way back in the day, 30 or 40 years ago, I had my first really young child. Back when I taught all the time, in the 90s, I was like kind of a well-known musician in a sort of a rock thing, and you were like kind of the regional kind of rock star thing. And so I had all these kids that were like, "Oh, you're so cool," and they were like, 13 and the mid-20s, and I so enjoyed teaching them. I so enjoyed trying to figure out what would make a difference. Mm-hmm. I've never approached any student exactly the same. And I didn't realize how much I enjoyed that until I wasn't doing it as much. But I had these two. I know. I forgot. I lost my train of thought. I had my first student was this 5-year-old girl, and I was teaching mostly teenagers. And I was like, oh man, I don't know, 5 years old, and she was beautiful and really quiet and really thoughtful. I mean, it was just a little 5-year-old, maybe 6, just a gem of a person, just wonderful. And I remember teaching her, a basic blues pattern, and they had her little recital, and there's a video of me and her playing, and she forgot and played one thing like 5 times, and I went with her, played the one chord change, and that was wonderful. I really enjoyed teaching.
Yeah, when I was researching you, it came up something a student of yours had said that really something I think about and ask people about is how do you encourage both the intuitive and the analytical and making that switch?
Oh, one of my students said that. I don't even that sounds like me. What I like, if somebody is a very intuitive person, they musically, I'll go with that strength, but I'll try to have them engage both elements, the analytical and the intuitive, because when you get, what I find with myself and with my students, when you get stuck in just the being, really intuitive and auditory, you can get stuck. There's limitations, and you can get bogged down, and you can break out of that with, some theory, some technique, some of the more analytical aspects of music. And the opposite's true. And I've had students that are like super analytical or super, sort of theory-based or whatever. And, with them, that I would work on their weakness. Mm-hmm. And because I think if you have both engaged, your intellect and your intuition, it's going to be a lot more helpful for you as a musician. And I'm very much like that. I mean, when I play, like when I'm playing for you, or when I play any time right now, I'm not trying to think. I don't want to be talking to myself. I just want to be playing, and I practice enough, or hopefully I have practiced enough, so that I always tell myself, I want to play on intention. I don't want to play on the act of playing. And what I mean is I want to play the way that I walk. When I walk, I don't think about what I'm doing, I think about where I want to go. So when I make a left turn, I'm not thinking, oh, this one leg has to do this kind of thing and this other thing, because otherwise I'll fall over. I have so much confidence that I can get to the store, but I'm not going, oh God, how do I do this step, that step, this step, kind of thing. I want to play that well. I want to, and I don't, but that's my goal, is to just be able to pick up the instrument and manifest my ideas without too much bogged down in thinking about how to do it, or that kind of thing. But to get there, I'm super analytical. When I practice, I'll always try to identify what is the weakest link in this thing, this phrase or whatever. Right now it's trying to get this finger to work bent this far back, because when I'm doing this new technique with my thumb to line it up, this finger is almost playing on top of itself, and that is bizarre. It is a bizarre feeling. It's like you're on top of it, and so I'm the kind of person that will analyze what the problem is, and then just beat it into the ground, just massive amount of repetitions. A lot of times when I practice, I'll put something on my computer that's visually not too interesting, but enough so that I can practice some repetitive thing for 2 hours, and I can kind of just be looking at something where I'm getting that muscle memory or that physiology in. So that's that's the thing I used to teach some of my students. I said, if you're going to, definitely don't only practice like this, but if you're going to watch a movie or something, put your guitar in your hand and just stretch your fingers and just sit there and digitally work your fingers. You don't have to be thinking about. It only takes a little bit of concentration to get your fingers to move in a certain way, but just do massive amount of reps to get your nervous system to be able to handle that move unconsciously. I want to make all these tough moves, and then the bass. I mean, it's the Bazantar, the bass, whatever. I mean, it's hard to put 3 notes together that are in tune and don't sound like you're moving furniture. It's a rough instrument to be lyrical on, and
So Mark, your first album, Fool, you played both sitar and Bazantar.
That's true. Yeah.
So how did that work?
I was playing a lot of sitar back then, and I had just a huge repertoire of stuff. And the Bazantar is, it's pretty low in tune. It's a bass, and so I was giving myself a higher voice for the whole as a concept. I was giving myself a higher voice and then this lower voice. And the whole album, have you seen the artwork in the album? There's a huge there's a wild graph where I graph out what I'm doing visually. And it's on 3 layers, and it shows all these different oscillating patterns from light to dark, from high to low, from fast to slow. And the golden mean is in there, all this stuff. And it also shows, and it's very beautiful. I drew it out. And then a friend of mine who's a graphic designer manifested it on a computer. It was all written out by hand. And it's got all these metaphysical ideas, of struggle and suffering. I'm not sure if that answered what you were asking me, though. How did that work?
That was very interesting. But practically speaking, did you record the sitar first and then?
Okay. No. I recorded the Bazantar first.
Okay.
Okay, that was in 1998, and I finished the instrument in October of 1997. And but to answer that question specifically, no, I recorded all the Bazantar stuff first, and then I recorded the sitar stuff after.
Okay.
The first piece on the album is interesting. The first piece is a bunch of gongs that are tuned to a suspended ninth chord, and then there's a sitar piece that comes in. And it's really, really simple. It's 5 notes. And I was on the 49th day of a 52-day fast.
Oh my goodness.
And I don't play like that. The way that piece is, it's great. I wish I played like that all the time. It is super simple, but it just works. And it works in a really profound way for me. And I was sitting there, I was all way thinner than normal and way out there, man. My mind was in a really great place, and I just remember I was exhausted, which was kind of great for recording, because when you record, you get uptight, you start to try to play perfect and all that kind of stuff. And I was just in this other really awesome headspace, and I was super tired, and I was just I'm just going to play exactly what I feel. It was this really simple thing, and turned out to me really magical. The very first piece, and it completely captured my mood, which was a good space. So I had kind of, when you fasting, that was the longest fast I've ever done, and you just end up letting go of so much stuff, and that piece really exemplified just a really deep letting go of all kinds of crap.
This is an excerpt from The Painted Bird on Mark's first album, Fool, which is sitar with Bazantar. Was someone guiding you through this fast?
Oh no, I had been fasting for a month every 6 months, starting, and that goes along with the development of the Bazantar. I had studied with this witch doctor, shaman, madman, starting in the late 80s. And when I say to people, my teacher, I'm always talking about this guy who wasn't a musician. But it was the hardest thing I've done. It was the most challenging, even more challenging than me getting in the conservatory when I didn't know anything about classical music, which is probably the second most challenging thing I did. But this was years. I mean, I worked with him for quite a few years, and I just developed a bunch of knowledge. And I actually didn't fast with him, but I had learned how. I'm not recommending people fast for that long. I mean, I have a certain kind of body type. I wouldn't recommend you do that. I'm a big guy, and I can not eat for a long time, and I'm fine. And that's pretty abnormal. But I would do. They weren't like fast of just water. They were either like carrot juice fast, or some kind of juice fast.
Oh, okay.
So. They're pretty hardy, but they were extreme, but they weren't extreme for me. I found out that if I did this every 6 months, I just had an intense sort of clarity in my life.
Okay.
But it was cool because I would shut down for like a month. I wouldn't take on very many students because you could really, it was hard. I got really cranky sometimes fasting as your body's detoxing and all that kind of stuff. That sort of mystical, or whatever you want to call it, kind of stuff was a big part of my life when I was going to Bazantar.
And the Picasso tunings, there's all these albums in that, so it's the specific tuning of the Bazantar.
I like Picasso, but I'm really into art.
Yeah.
Picasso's fine. I'm not a big Picasso fan, but I like Picasso. The Picasso tunings, I am tuning the top strings of the instrument, the strings that you would play on the violin. I'm tuning them super specifically and very bizarre. Like one piece is tuned in tritones. Okay, but it's a very specific tritone. It's not. There's two tritones. One is 45 over 64, and the other one is. It's 64 over 45, the other one's 32 over 45, whatever. These if you tune it to this very specific tritone, the harmonics that come out of it make this gorgeous 6-note scale. Yeah. But you have to learn how to play the instrument with the strings not in the place where you thought they were. It's not tuned in fourths anymore. I'm a bass player, the violinist, not tuned in fifths. The piece Antique Slippers is got half steps. It's F sharp, F, C, F, F sharp. So if you can imagine playing your instrument with strings a half step apart, that gives you this beautiful rod in harmonics. So you can play the harmonics just where the harmonics don't move. They're in the same place on the instrument no matter what. So you figure out like how to play your scales and bowing, and it's like all this weird back and forth bowing and stuff. But then if you're going to put your finger down on the instrument, everything is like in the wrong place. I mean, really in the wrong place. And I was trying to explain this, and I don't know if I've explained this well enough to you, because I was explaining this to a bass player, and he would not get it. He just could not get that I was tuning the top strings and half steps and tritones and whole steps and fourth fifths and all kinds of things. And I said, it's like Picasso, it's like Guernica. Everything's in the wrong place. It's the Picasso tunings.
Okay.
And so that phrase, that Picasso tunings, it came up as again and again for me to try to explain to people. When you look at a Picasso tuning, the nose is in the wrong place and the eyes are in the wrong place. That's what it's like to play the Bazantar.
You're about to hear Antique Slippers, the 8th movement, from the Picasso Tunings.
And that was a really extreme thing to do. I wasn't getting any work at the time. I moved to San Francisco, and nobody knew me, and I wanted to, I had this idea that I built a Bazantar, and I was getting work. But I was getting work as a bass player, and people were like, "Oh yeah, bring the Bazantar, and we'll." But what they really wanted was a bass player, because bass players are always in need, and I was a good bass player, and they'd be like, "Okay, yeah, bring the sitar, bring the Bazantar, we'll work it in." But really, I couldn't get away from being a bass player. So I just kiboshed my life and moved someplace where nobody knew me, and I didn't tell anybody I played bass, and I tried to establish myself in this new way as a Bazantar player, which was kind of crazy. I mean, because I went from some place where everybody knew me and respected me, and I could get work, more work than I ever wanted, and to a place where nobody knew me. And it wasn't. I was planning on moving to LA or New York, and then I ended up moving to San Francisco because I had an ex-girlfriend that needed a roommate, and I was like, okay, San Francisco sounds cool, but it wasn't like a great place to, develop. So anyhow, I wasn't getting any work, and I was upset because I was just broke. I was living in the most expensive place in the world, in the United States, and I was just dying. Just like I had to start an organic produce business, which is, I still have it. I still do it. It's called Guerrilla Organics, but I'd never done anything in my life except be a musician. I've been a musician since I was 12. I didn't know anything else. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to buy produce and, drive around delivering it, which worked, it was amazing. But in that time I was just so annoyed. I had always been able to get work my whole life. Started at 12, and I've always worked as a musician. And I'm not proud of this, but I got really angry and really depressed. And I was like, screw this, man. I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm just going to do I can't really perform like this because once I'm in one tuning, it takes a whole stringing. It's like the research I've done in the strings, is nuts. Bass strings, they come in there's a lot of variation in bass strings because there's a solo tuning thing where instead of being E, A, D, G, it's F sharp, B, whatever. It's a whole step higher. So there's all these different gauges and stuff. So I was able to mix and match all these different kind of strings to get like a tuning on my Bazantar that was like F, F sharp, C, F, F sharp, where the tension and everything, was balanced. You could play on it. And then because I'm a sitar player and you play on one string on the sitar, I could look at the string no matter where it started and see where all the intervals were. Okay, that's a third, that's a whatever. But looking up like one string, And so I approached each string on the Bazantar like that. It was like, okay, F sharp is like the sa, so I know where all those notes are. F is and it sounds crazy and really hard, and it is. And if you've never done it, it's like impossible. But once you start thinking like that, it's not as hard as you might. I got really good at it, and I did that for like 5 years. And I will get you this recording where I recorded on that, where I just recorded the sympathetic strings. And it doesn't sound like anything like the Bazantar. It sounds like an extraterrestrial orchestra. And you would never think that it's one instrument. And the recording is one pass, and I recorded the sympathetics in isolation because I have all these pickups on them. And then I took that sound and I bounced it against something really hard and got a good echo. And then that's what you're hearing. Because the sound of just the sympathetic strings through the pickups, the piezoelectric, pickups, and they have this ugly sort of, character. They're fine for plucking, but with bowing, whatever. And even with the sympathetics, it sounded like bowed barbed wire. It was brittle. And so I took the whole sound and I just like threw it up against something, captured the echo,
And then I have this amazing, and I mean, it is amazing. I haven't released the album yet. I had a bunch of different offers and whatnot. But you would never, in your wildest imagination, think that this was a bass for one thing, or that it was just one instrument.
You're about to hear an excerpt from Bardo, which is as yet unreleased. And in this piece, Mark is just using the sympathetic strings and activating with harmonics on the main strings.
And basically what I'm doing is I'm playing all those harmonics, on your violin or your bass, where there's all these harmonics. So I'm playing all these harmonics, and they're all compounding, and because the math is so perfect, the energy from one sympathetic will compound with another sympathetic, and you just get this otherworldly, beautiful, incredibly evocative sound. It sounds like you got a bunch of Tibetan monks and their ghosts, singing.
Mm-hmm.
It's really beautiful. I had a really heartbreaking experience during this time where I was totally broke, and I have this friend that I he's a very famous scientist, Jaron. Lanier. He's the guy that invented virtual reality, or is the founding father of virtual reality. And he, I think I mentioned him. He's like the guy that gave me the oud. We recorded a lot together, and he's like the only guy before the Bazantar was finished that thought it could work. And he's just a really bizarre, interesting dude. He's a really good musician. We play together here. He lives in San Francisco. We both moved to the Bay Area exactly at the same time. He took my playing, mine and his playing, a duo, and showed it to Quincy Jones. And I was playing these super high harmonics, and it doesn't sound like a bass. It sounds like a gigantic violin. You've heard some of the harmonic works on the Picasso Tunings, right? You hear how high it plays. This was even more extreme than that. This was with a harpsichord. And so Quincy Jones listened to it, and Jaron's wife was there. And Quincy Jones was like, "No, it's not a bass. Nobody can do that. It's not possible." Because he didn't understand the tuning and how I could get harmonics super high and get all these really, and he was like, "No," and he got really angry. And Jaron's wife, Elena, was there going, "I sat right next to him when he recorded this. This is some guy on a huge bass." And it was like, Quincy Jones, like the biggest producer, and he's like, "No, it's not possible," and he stormed out and said, "You're bullshit."
So I think what would be really great, if you want to play some more, is maybe just play and just talk a little bit about improvisation to kind of close this out a bit.
So we were talking about this new fingering that I've been working on. So this is some of what the results are. It's like being able to play chords like that. Chords like in that position. One of the things that's nice about this fingering is your hand is set up in a way that fourths are hard to play on a bass because they're right next to each other. So it's always a challenge how to get a fourth to sound smooth. You can either go, and with this finger, you can either do this. You can get the fourth spread there. So that's cool. But you can also, because of the way your fingers end up lining up, you can get the fourth between these two fingers, which is nice and smooth. It's like what a blues guitar player is. It's like that comes from my guitar playing. It's like to be able to get that fourth that's doing. And I'm using my thumb as a finger in a way it's tricky. It's very tricky. This is a technique that I'm not sure how it works. And you as a violinist might, I've had some discussions. So I'm playing a note. Now I'm bending a harmonic.
Yeah.
You know, you're not supposed to be able to bend a harmonic. You know, but there's a technique with my bow of going down and getting this harmonic. It sounds really cool on low strings, and I've used this in a bunch of different film recording stuff I've done. A lot of it is with the bow. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to find the harmonic with the bow, and it feels to me is like a reptile has that those scales, mm-hmm. you know, and it's like if you get go past the scale, hook it, and then lift it up a little bit. It feels like that's what I'm doing with the harmonic. So it's like I can find it, hit it, I'll feel it with my hand, my bow hand, and then just kind of pull up on it, and I can bring it out. And I tell you, me talking about it makes it super hard because then I'm thinking about it. And on the Picasso tunings, I use this a lot. I was playing a lot of harmonics, which how I developed this technique, this rolling bow harmonic technique, or playing chords, you know, is I was recording Fool, and I was recording Kundalini Rising, which is a piece that's just harmonics. How the album works, you were asking about how the sitar thing sort of worked, is it oscillates between a low voice and a high voice. But for that piece, I'm not using the sitar. I'm using something like this going on. Same. Anyhow, that wasn't what I was planning to do in the studio. Because that was impossible. I had no idea that I could do that. It wasn't in my sound man. It was fabulous because he recorded me. In the recording studio, it's like takes forever. You know, it's like setting up mics and doing all this stuff, and you're just sitting there bored out of your mind. And so I was playing something more like. I was playing single notes. So I was trying not to refine my intonation, but where that note is, you know. So instead of going, I was going. So I'd have one. But I was like just zombied out, just in the studio, just goofing off. And my sound man, Liam Christie, recorded it. And he knew that I was not going to record that because every time he pushed play, I would go, play single notes. And he's like, dude, you got to hear this because it sounds like seagulls like taking off. And I was like, okay. He's like, and he played it for me. I was, oh, whoa. I was like, that's incredible, And it was like right now, the sympathetics are not tuned to that. So you're not hearing the sympathetics just explode when they're tuned. And the sympathetics have to be tuned really, really perfectly. That's a whole another story about the instrument. If you want them to sing, I mean, you could, but you need to. My intonation has gotten like ridiculously better playing this instrument because the sympathetics won't ring if you don't play really in tune. And so he played that for me, and I was like, hold it. I said, this is going to take me a minute. And he said, give me like 3 days. And I spent like 3 days, 12 hours, just over and over, this brand new technique, and then we recorded it. And that's Kundalini Rising on the Fool album. That was me just learning this technique.
This is an excerpt from Kundalini Rising from the album Fool.
So there's the harmonics, and they're always in the same place. But then there's what I call the shamanic bowing thing, just because it's like. I haven't been practicing my bowing for many months, and because of that, once you really get into doing that, there is a lot of like color and texture and oscillation, and that mixing in with the sympathetics can take a voice that's a bass and give it a lot. If you're going to do a solo album, and I think the Picasso Tunings is like 4 CDs and 7 LPs, having a lot of different voices. So you go from like rich, thick sound. And a lot of things you can do with that. It pulls out different harmonics. I like it, but it's a really, really subtle technique. And it's one of those things where I was saying I have to practice enough to where I'm not thinking about what this technique is. I'm just thinking about my intention of what sound I want. A lot of times when I lecture or just demonstrate the math that I'm talking about, I like to show people what the harmonic series sounds like. That's like the first harmonic. That's the 2 division, the string divided in half. And that's the 3. And then 2 places, then it goes to the 4th. That's the fifth. Now here's the seventh. And then you get a whole scale. And then
I know you've studied different tuning systems, and in terms of the way the natural frequencies occur, how does that line up with the, Indian music, for example, that you studied a lot?
well, Indian music is where I first started to learn that. And you're basically trying to set up a sonic fractal. You know, it's the opposite of encryption. Like um, the the person that got this the quickest was not a musician, but um, a dude who was he's like a expert witness or something, but he deals in encryption. And I was on tour. This was my tour, and I showed up in Hartford, Connecticut. Like he was like the smartest dude I've ever met, man. And I just met him, and I was exhausted, and I'd been driving and traveling, and nobody was home, and he was there. Me and him just talked. He was a super nice guy. Kind of had a vibe like you in a way. And he just was asking me questions, and the questions he asked were so amazing, and he explained back to me what I do in the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
And the opposite of what I do is encryption, where you're trying to get the high primes. Encryption has to do with using high prime numbers to make something that is incoherent and uncrackable, but vibrationally will not. The the factors are so high mathematically that it's like you're building something that doesn't work at all vibrationally. There's no internal coherence, and that's really hard to break. And he explained what I'm doing is you're building something that's super coherent and that is everything is as interrelated as it can possibly be. And how that works without, I don't know if I want, well, how that works is you use the first two primes that are different and the prime that's the same, which is the octave. This is the string divided in two, so that's two. Two's a prime, but it's the only even prime. And so you use that, which is 2, 4, 8, anything that's doubled. You use those as factors. That's basically the octave, or octave up, octave down. No big deal. It doesn't create any new notes. The first thing that creates new notes is when you divide the string into 3.
Yeah.
So you get that's the first new prime, which is 3ness. I call it 3ness because the note is actually a perfect fifth. And so in the Chinese system and Pythagorean system of tuning, they just use fifths. They generate all their notes. So it's like, and what I mean when I say you generate notes, it's like you're on C, and a fifth of that, or the 3 factor of that is G, and that 3 factor of G is D, which is 9. And then you keep going. 27 is the A. And so how these notes occur and how they're interrelated is they're all based on a fifth. And that fifth is 2 cents higher than a tempered fifth. It's 702 cents instead of 700 cents. And the tempered fifth is based off the square root of 2. And and so it's an irrational number. But in the Indian system, you have to have a tonic, and as long as you have a tonic, you can add in the next prime, which is 5, and that sounds like this. This is the fundamental. That's 2ness. That's 3ness. So you're going to use that to build your notes. Here's 4ness. 4ness is the same as 2ness. It's just an octave up. And then that's 5ness. So you take those first 2 prime factors and you start compounding them, and you get a fractal vibrational matrix where it's the most internally coherent, meaning it's the most in tune with itself as you could possibly get. You don't use 7. There's a whole bunch of reasons, and there's a bunch of esoteric stuff. You don't use 7 because it sounds like this, though. 7 sounds...
Going back to my teacher, he was like, okay, it's going to take you forever to learn how to do this. I'm like, no, it's not. And I programmed the vibrations into this programmable tuner. And I just used it like, I just played into the tuner, like figuring out where these notes were. At the same time, and that's like attacking it from the intellectual, like, you know, like say, a minor third. There's a minor third that's 300 cents, that's a tempered one. There's another one that's 316 cents, and that's 6 vibrations to 5. And that's like the blue note, and that has like a heroic characteristic. You know, but there's another one that's 22 cents lower than the 316, which is I think 294 cents. Minus 6 cents, and that's melancholy. And so I would learn these by like the intellectual, like it's this much higher, this much lower, but then what is the poetic way of experiencing this? Now, I did that on my own because that's the only way that I could latch onto it. I couldn't latch onto it being 16 cents higher. I had to have a major third, okay? There's the major third that's 5/4. It's in the overtone series. It's how the overtone divides itself into half, and divides itself into 3, and it divides itself into 4. Well, when it divides itself into 5, you get a major third. That's 14 cents lower than tempered. Tempered is 400. It's 386 cents. That's a lot lower. And you'll get it on your violin or whatever, but that is always a lot lower. To me, that sounds like warm, glowing sundown. You know, it's got a really warm, luscious, soothing. So when I want to hit that, and if I'm not hitting it as a harmonic, that's what I'm listening for. The one that's higher than that is the 5th of the 5th of the 5th of the 5th. It's like if you're on C, it's up a 5th to G, which is plus 2 cents. Up a 5th to D, which is another 2, that's 4. Up to A, that's 6 cents, and then up to E. And so that's plus 8 cents. There's always a 22 cent difference between these two, and that's what the Shruti is, and that's 81 over 80, and that's the gap where God lives, as the Indian musicians would say. But that one is like bright, shimmering light. How light reflects through running water. You know, if you have like a waterfall and that water, that's that characteristic. So that's the poetic way of me grasping these vibrations. And then the tempered one, which is based on 12th root of 2, which doesn't have a overtone that it relates to because it's an irrational number. The 12th root of 2 is a never-ending, never-repeating number. So there is no fundamental for that. It's like, that sounds like a glare on a windshield. If you give them sort of a poetic thing to listen to. How the Bazantar came about was I was trying to attack this from the intellectual, was knowing the math. Knowing the math, putting it in a tuner, playing, seeing where it is, adjusting, trying to experience it with giving it some poetic, literary sort of idea that I could hang on to. The other thing I was doing was mostly playing sarong music, which is a bowed indigenous Indian instrument, which is gorgeous. I don't know how to describe it. Do you know the sarong?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's really amazing. It's haunting, beautiful. There's a guy, Ram Naraya, that I used to listen to, and then Ustad Sultan Khan. And I had studied with this Andean shamanic dude for like quite a while before this, and he had me do all this work in my dreams. It was very intense, hard work, and that had a big influence on where my headspace was. It didn't have anything to do with music much, but it had to do with, I don't know, some sort of spiritual, psychic, whatever. So I would work in my dreams, and I would play this saranga music because the pitches are so clearly hearable compared to like maybe listening to the sitar or the silver or whatever. And it's the perfect music to sleep to. It's so peaceful and haunting and whatever. So, now there was no Bazantar at this time. I was still just studying sitar and trying to get to learn how to play these shrudis, the soul vibrations. And I was trying to do it like in 2 months instead of 20 years, which I was able to do it. I never told my teacher what I did. He just was like, wow. I just let him think I was like some kind of genius or something. And so one night I was dreaming and listening to this music, and I dreamed that I was playing the bass because I was an acoustic bass player. And my acoustic bass had sympathetic and drone strings on it like the sitar. And so I had this dream. I didn't remember that it was a dream when I woke up. I didn't remember the dream. But I did think that I had read about a bass with sympathetic strings. And this was before the internet and all that. It was like I used to have like Omni magazines and musician these different magazines about music and futuristic stuff or whatever. And so I was looking through these magazines trying to think, like, where is this bass with sympathetic strings that I heard about? And I couldn't find it, and so then about maybe 3 or 4 nights later, I put the CD again, and I had a CD changer that would play up repeatedly all night. And as soon as I put the same music in, I remembered the dream, which was pretty cool because it was a couple days, And so then I remembered the dream. I was like, oh, that was a dream. Wow, that's cool. Nobody's done this.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to this as a string player, and when I played Baroque violin, that's when I was first exposed to that idea of like lower thirds and listening for that. And it's certainly different as a violinist if you play with a piano or if you're in a string group or, there's all these things. So to close this out, maybe do you want to just reflect on, like, I guess you mentioned that you want to just keep working on your playing and do another recording. I assume all your recordings are improvised in all your performances?
Get hard sometimes, and I can read music. I played in an orchestra for years, and I grew up playing over changes. I mean, I was a machine at playing over changes because I learned so young. I played so many gigs. But my aesthetic is I want to give people some representation of some other moment in time. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I love listening to Beethoven recordings, and there's a lot of that. And it's wonderful. But what my aesthetic is I want to give you this creative moment of like July 6th performance. Never going to play anything like this again. This is going to, I have things that I do, but no performance is ever locked in stone. It will always evolve with who I am at them and who I'm playing for and what the environment is, what the space is. And that's definitely not the only way to play music. I mean, that's just what I've decided to take as my aesthetic. I can play, when I get hired for, doing film scores or stuff, a lot of times they'll have, really specific lines and stuff, and that's fine. There's no problem with that, particularly if I get paid. But otherwise, it's almost like a martial art, I feel like a martial artist, works on all these moves and does all these things, and then when it's time to fight or do whatever they fight, they just go on automatic, and hopefully they've practiced their moves enough so that they can move on intention instead of on memory. I'm planning to do another album, for sure. And I was planning to do it by now. And I kind of feel bad because I have a guy now, and I've got a lot of people like, hey, I want your next album, and what's happening. But I'm working on this technique with this new tuning in my thumb. And until I'm able to run these lines the way I'm able to run them on my guitar. Like that's my goal. That's my metric. Is I'll figure out lines on the guitar, and then I'll say, well, that's what I want to play on the Bazantar, which is freaking impossible, And then I'll figure out the fingering, and until I can get that kind of fluidity. When you hear a lot of bass players play, even really great ones, there's a real bumpiness to the playing. It's like do 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 do, which is fun, but that's not what I want to do. That's not how I want my lines to sound. I want them to sound lyric, and so I'm close. I mean, last couple of weeks, the technique has fallen a little bit more in my subconscious. Even when I was playing for you right now, I just I went back to my regular way of playing, which I'm very comfortable with. Because if I'm performing, like I'll be performing in a couple days, I'm not going to go with a technique that I have to think about. Even if I'm working on it, it's like, if it doesn't show up, it doesn't show up. And so until it starts showing up in my playing as the best move I've got for some idea, I don't want to record it quite yet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's been wonderful to meet you today and to have this close-up experience of the Bazantar.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please share this with your friends and check out episodes you may have missed at LahjaRoseman.com. If you could buy me a coffee to support this series, that would be wonderful. Or you can browse the collection of merch with a very cool, unique, and expressive design from artist Steffi Kelly with notebooks, mugs, shirts, phone cases, and more. I'm an independent podcaster, and I really do need the help of my listeners. All the links are in the show notes. Have a wonderful week.